For those of you who are listening, we are in large format mode on Zoom, which means that there is not the ability to see all of the other people in the meeting. There is a participants button. Or actually, I think only we see the participants button. You do not see it. There are 151 attendees, 152, 153 currently in the meeting, but you do not have the ability to do that. For us to support a large meeting like this, unfortunately, Zoom doesn't allow us to show everybody's faces. And I'm a little disappointed in that, because part of a community meeting is the community. But we will persevere and try to get you guys all of the information and answer your questions this evening.
So do you want to start recording?
Sure.
Okay. All right, we are recording.
Okay. So I have, welcome everybody. I'm Aaron Muterich, President, Narberth Borough Council. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to attend our informational town hall and President's Forum. Sort of the format of this evening, we have a Q&A button. If you press the Q&A button, you can ask questions, and we will get to a question and answer where we will answer your questions. Also, those of you who submitted questions ahead of time, I have collated those here in the notes, and hopefully we've either integrated the answer to your question into the presentation, in which case I won't address the question directly, or I will address the question directly with an answer, hopefully to your satisfaction. Statements which have been submitted of support for one particular thing or another will not be read tonight, but I have collated those into one large document, and they will be made available on the borough website tomorrow, and along with the recording of this meeting. And I suggest everyone be aware that this meeting is being recorded and it's available for later viewing. That means that you have the ability to review this at your leisure. You can watch it again. You can cue in on a certain portion, maybe that was unclear, but also that any chats that you make or questions that you ask will be on the public record and available on the borough website. And we will create a FAQ to summarize everything that happened this evening and try to be as informational as possible. So with that said, we have 178 participants. I wanted to address first misinformation. Misinformation is very dangerous in any community, and especially here. This flyer, which went out to different neighbors, includes misinformation. And I guess there is no 5 to 7 story curb to curb apartment building that council is planning to build. I don't know where that came from. It's not a thing. I don't even know, in attending all of these meetings, that an idea like that was ever brought up or discussed by anybody, except maybe as a hyperbole of exactly what we were not interested in doing. And so I ask you that if you hear things which sound unbelievable, check the borough website, email any of your council people. We enjoy speaking with you. There are only 4,200 people in this community. It's not so large that we can't respond to you personally and individually and correct misinformation, so that everybody is sort of on a level playing field in a world of ideas of what is the best thing for our community. That said, let's go on. So let's talk about 201 Sabine. What is it? It's a 3.41 acre property. The school component on the left side of this picture is 2.5 acres. It's a sloped property. And you can see if you're driving down Montgomery Avenue, it's quite high up off the road. It includes the former school building, the parking lot, and Sabine Avenue Park. All of that is one property owned by the borough of Narberth. The building is 44,900 square feet. Depending on where it sits on the slope, it ranges from 1 to 3 stories in height. There are 127 parking spaces, and the income from renting that building represents about 5% of the borough budget. The site was used for public schools since 1892, and the current building construction finished in 1963. It was used as Narberth School, and then it was closed in 1978 when the Pennsylvania State Legislature changed the requirements for small school districts, and there was significant consolidation of different schools. At that point, it was leased to the Siegel Corporation for 30 years to allow them to manage it as a commercial occupancy. They could manage it however they liked. They had their own offices there for some time, and then as they shrunk, rented it out for other uses. In exchange, they would pay the borough $200,000 every year for the 30 years. In 2008, that agreement lapsed, and the borough regained management control and went through a series of property managers to help us manage commercial tenants on a daily basis. Herbert Yentis and Company is the current property manager. During this time, there was an outstanding claim from Lower Merion School District that they had a right to recapture this building and use it for their purposes. And exactly what those purposes might be was up for some debate and resulted in a lawsuit between Narberth Borough and Lower Merion School District. Ultimately, that lawsuit was negotiated and resolved. And the resolution was that Lower Merion still had a right to retain the property to use to build an elementary school until 2018, at which point they notified us that they did not intend to execute their rights there. And the borough became the free and clear owner and now is able to make long-term decisions about the property. So it's currently home to 6 commercial tenants. Wonder Spring, which is the daycare and also the home of their administrative offices, as they have many locations and services they offer in the Philadelphia area. Lavner Camps with offices and some activity space. Fitrition with exercise and wellness. The Narberth Community Food Bank with social services. SSI is an IT firm, and Puretho, a medical equipment provider. And this is a little bit of a breakdown here. You can see that Wonder occupy more than 50% of the square footage, with the other tenants, sort of moving downward in size, with SSI being the smallest renter. So as the borough saw that it was going to become the free and clear owner of the property, it contracted with KCBA, an architectural firm, to conduct a facilities assessment of all borough properties and to give us some information about what we had now that we knew it was ours. The report, which is available on the borough website, summarized functions and amenities. We looked at the park, we looked at the municipal building, and we also looked at 201 Sabine and received from KCBA estimates regarding necessary repairs, maintenance, renovations that would allow us to continue to have productive use of the property as it aged, coming up now on 60 years. So the costs from this report were then integrated into the borough's capital improvement plan, which we implemented a few years ago, so that we could plan for these needs and we could manage our debt load so that we didn't have spikes or other things that would negatively impact our need to raise taxes, which we don't want to do. We can go to the next slide. There we go. So what I think we went too far. There we go. Perfect. So they identified between 4.2 and 4.7 million in necessary repairs. And I put a star there because we cost adjusted their estimates, which were about 10% lower due to the fact that construction costs have increased in the 2 years. So currently we are looking at 4.2 to 4.7, even though in the report it says something like 3.5 or 3.7. But those numbers are adjusted, and that's why that asterisk is there. And I want everyone to be aware of that. But in some ways, it speaks to the longer we wait, that costs will go up. The estimates include the $600,000 in roof repairs, which are completed. So you could take that off the top, so to speak, if we're being forward looking. $200,000 in ADA accessibility improvements, about $800,000 in basic efficiency modernization, and the additional dollars, because you can see they don't all add up to that total are things like replacing the windows and replacing the mechanicals and HVAC system as they reach the end of their useful life. So what we saw when we punched those numbers into our trusty calculator was that the annual debt service over 20 years, 20-year life for those updates exceeded the current net income of the property. So if currently we are receiving about $250,000 a year, the debt service would be about $275,000 a year. And that got us to thinking. What could we do? Well, we could just do it and have a building that operated at a net loss and cover that loss from the borough budget. We could increase the property taxes to match do the repairs and then increase property taxes to offset the lost revenue. We could increase the rents at 201 Sabine to the tenants and hope that we were able with the renovated space to obtain enough rent dollars to offset these costs. Instead, I think we thought, well, let's just try to think outside the box a little. What can we do differently? So the idea was to create a non-binding request for proposal, an RFP, to solicit ideas from potential developers or organizational partners. So when we think developer, a lot of time we think people who build homes or who build a commercial building. We're talking about someone who has experience potentially developing a space with mixed use of public-private uses that would allow us to find the revenue that we need to sort of improve this site while also retaining community uses. So we can move to the next slide. I did see a chat. Did he just yada yada over $3 million? And I'll point it out on a future slide, but if you go to the borough website, you can pull up the KCBA report and you can read it in detail. I didn't want in this presentation, there's a lot of information here to get lost in too deep numbers, and that was my choice. And I don't think we're trying to hide anything. All of those numbers are there in black and white, and I encourage you to look at the KCBA report. With the exception of COVID-related rental payment deferrals, all the tenants are currently good payers and current. That was a question that we received. The rental component of the site is currently fully leased. There is no empty space. The commercial grounds and buildings do have significant maintenance needs. And if you go walk around the site, I think you can see that on the outside. If you've been inside or you have children there, I think you can see that as well. There was a question as to whether tenants pay market rates for the use of this space, and the answer is yes. Council made a decision many years ago that this was a commercial property. It was not a pet project site where we would offer discounted space to certain uses. I think if we were talking about sort of a future use with an RFP process, it would be possible to maybe consider certain spaces which are rented more affordably for community uses and other spaces which might charge more for more commercial or residential uses, if that's the direction the community chooses to go. A Monco CDBG grant was used to install an elevator, which is what made the Narberth Food Bank space possible. Previously, it was accessible only through some very steep stairs, as it was a second floor mezzanine addition put in by the Siegel Corporation. And the space was challenged because it was built as a mezzanine for a light office use. It can't support a group gathering on that second floor. The structure literally was not built to support that. So the food bank has to be careful of and mindful of how much material they store up there and to store it near the edges of the space. It is not a particularly usable space. So here, why are we here? With this expiration of the agreement, the property's in the borough hands, and we need to make the best decisions for it in the community. We are no longer able to say, well, we can't do anything because it's not really ours. So here we are. So highest and best use is a phrase often used in real estate to mean extracting the maximum financial return out of a particular property. I want to use that phrase, but I would like to change its definition for this meeting. And in the context of this meeting, it means something different. What is the highest and best use for our community? Different uses may have different financial implications, and different uses have different implications for the livability and desirability of our community. So, council decided to enter into an RFP process, and I'll go through the timeline in a few slides. But I want to make it very, very clear that as we develop a request for proposal and put it out into the world, it is non-binding. We can receive responses and we can choose to throw every one of them away. We can put out those RFPs and state that it is our desire that the borough retains ownership of the land, regardless of what is developed on it. Something like a ground lease agreement would also outline approved and prohibited uses, so that if there was a development with the borough retaining the land, that the borough would retain ongoing control of what can happen on that site. It could return revenue to the borough. It could begin delivering property taxes, and it would enable us to possibly participate in the revenues generated by that. Public participation, why you're here right now, is what's going to shape those requirements and help us to understand what does this community want. I say, what does the community want? The property is the borough's largest asset. The borough is a built-out community. There is no more green space. So I would just say on its face that the borough would sell this property to be developed for housing or to be developed into a 5 to 7 story apartment building does not make sense. How do we leverage our asset to help deliver on our community goals? And every one of us might have a different opinion about what those community goals are, but the fundamental concept I'm trying to make here is that our community has needs, and this is a plot of land that is our largest asset, which could be transformed to help meet those needs, to help turn things which are sort of dreams that are very vague and we can't figure out how they could ever become a reality, possibly could become a reality at this site. But to do that, we need to engage in a community process to understand what are the goals. And that's why you are here tonight. Why should we do anything at all? I've heard a lot of questions, legitimate. Why are we doing this? Well, one reason is because now the property belongs to us, so we can. The second is maybe the current use is the best use. But if we don't engage in a process to ask, is it? Then we'll never really know. And so the result of this process could potentially be that we go through all the potentials and all the future possibilities and we decide, you know what, we don't want to do anything. That is entirely possible. And I want to assure you that council comes to this with an open mind. But if we were to implement all of the repairs and maintenance, it means that we begin to lose money on the property rather than having a rental income source. And that prolonged indecision increases the chances of expensive emergency repairs and the financial risks of trying to rent an increasingly outdated building when there is a vacancy. Tenants do come and go for a variety of reasons, and months or years can go by in a commercial space before it can be re-rented. And when it is re-rented, it may require extensive landlord contributions to tenant fit out, which are not part of this calculation. So a decision-making time will come one day, and decisions are best made, especially by government, when they can be thoughtful and done over time with community involvement. So council's desire is to be proactive. Again, the reason we are here. What are we not doing? Council does not have a specific unpublished plan for this property. There is no plan. So again, what was on that flyer, I know that it can't be real because there is no plan. There is no hidden agenda. Council is concerned that in the future, maintenance on this property is going to exceed its income, and then we will be in a pickle. We are deeply concerned that we will not be able to maintain the building, and we are trying to reach out to the community to understand what are the goals for the community and what can we be doing to help move this community forward. I'm going to read this because I think it's important. I have to move my little window. No decisions have been made by council about the future of the property, including whether or not to ultimately accept any development proposal that is submitted. The borough has received no development proposals and has entered into no agreements, formal or informal, to convey any property right other than the existing tenant leases, which you can find on the borough website because they are public record. Nor has the borough agreed to permit development of the property. The only commitment that the borough has made related to this property is Resolution 2020-009, which was passed unanimously on April 15th, and it reads, when considering any alterations to the borough-owned property at 201 Sabine, the council pledges to maintain at a minimum the same amount of recreational open space that is currently present on the property and will encourage proposals for expansion of recreational open space with any development of the property. I received a lot of letters that we need more open space and we need more park and we need more places for people to be outside. And with this resolution that council made, I believe you can see council's commitment to making that happen. And so as we go through this process over many months, I ask you to consider that when you hear of a development proposal from a neighbor on Facebook, a flyer that doesn't match the goals of Resolution 2020-009, that you should think to yourself, maybe what I'm hearing is not true. Because this was unanimously passed by all the council members, and it is currently the resolution regarding this property. So if we are not presenting you with a plan tonight, why are we here? Well, council has two desires. One, to explore the strategies for the beneficial use of the property and to see if those strategies can also help preserve the income stream from the property. So we engaged with Real Estate Solutions to help advise us to identify these community priorities and prepare this RFP. I know I've been going over the same information again and again in different ways. I'm hoping in doing so to clear up a lot of the misinformation which has been out there and to give everyone a nice understanding of exactly where we are. So the borough will receive an RFP from RES, and then we'll go out and solicit non-binding development proposals. And we need you to be able to do that. A community thrives on transparency and clearly communicated goals. I am very proud of the service I've been able to perform here in Narberth with my council members and the mayor, because I believe the commitment to transparency and clear communication is shared by all of them. That's why we have an open space plan. That's why the borough adopted its first comprehensive plan, why we adopted the new form-based zoning code that is far more descriptive and far more informative to a layperson than the old Euclidean code. These documents record community values, and there are more of them, and they're on the borough website under long-term plans. The capital improvement project is capital improvement plan is another. We can refer to them as guiding documents when making any decisions. We have tried to create a culture in the borough leadership that decision-making is guided by these community goals, which are collected through consensus building processes over time, and that we do not make decisions based on personal preferences or personal desires of individual, us as individual council members. That is how we can build trust, which comes from that transparency and clear communication. More feedback means better results. I believe in the marketplace of ideas. And I see there are a lot of chats here, so I know that we have a healthy marketplace. So we're having this open dialogue now, and we recognize that coming to you with a vague concept and no specific plans can lead to a sense of uncertainty. But we will have more meetings where we can present to you more ideas, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. So here's the timeline. Council retained RES, and they have met with the tenants of 201 Sabine. Here we are. This is what I was hired to do. Tell me about your uses of the property. Tell me about your desire to stay. Tell me about issues you have with the property. Then RES and some council members met with near neighbors of 201 Sabine, people who are directly adjacent to the property or across the street. And then tonight we are meeting together as a whole community. By having different meetings with 3 different groups, we're able to get different perspectives, community perspectives, sort of immediate, this is what I would like to have happen outside of my house perspectives. And also, this is my business, this is my livelihood, this is what I do, this is what I think I'm contributing back to the community. After tonight, there will be a survey sent to the near neighbors who could not attend the prior workshop. A report then will be summarized, we'll put together to summarize all the community goals, everything we've heard, but putting them into some buckets. Maybe there are some themes, maybe there are some overwhelming trends, and that will be delivered back to Borough Council. Council will then, at a public meeting, discuss this report and talk about its own sense of community goals and how they align with the feedback that we've received. We'll then issue guidance back to RES, and RES will use that information to prepare an RFP. That RFP will then come back to council, and when it is, and it will be publicly available. It will be approved or denied, but ultimately it will come to a form where it is approved. And in that form, it will be circulated publicly to the development community and to anybody that wants to look at it. Then, after a period of time, council will have the responses from the RFP, if any, and discuss them in public sessions, pros and cons, and at that point have the opportunity to make a decision for some future action. As you could imagine, all of these steps are going to take many, many months. And I point that out because as we as a community understand our goals, then we can have even further discussion about whether, whether we really meant it. Like, that idea was a great idea, I liked it, but now that I'm seeing it come into focus, I can see some issues or problems. And so all of this will be happening in public. So a number of questions have already been submitted, and I believe if we go into the speaker notes, Beth, maybe, or I'm sorry, Sean, you could read some that you feel like haven't been addressed here and are formatted properly, that they can be addressed here, and anything that is maybe more complex or sort of data driven, where the answer is a spreadsheet or something like that, we will make that available in the FAQ that we will be putting together over the next couple of days as we integrate all your questions and comments.
So Aaron, I have a lot of questions here in our.
Some of them I had, yeah, just go ahead.
Share that right there. Questions already received here are the speaker notes.
So some of these I'll be able to answer. Some of them I think we can go to Beth, and some of them might even go to Mr. Metric, and we'll do the best we can. They've been coming in fast and furious, so I just want to tell you, I haven't had a chance to guarantee answers to all of them, but we will answer all of them, if not tonight, with that fact that will be coming in the next few days. So I put them in bold there. So what about existing tenants? A proposal could be that we want childcare as absolutely mandatory in whatever this proposal is. And we might even say we want a non-interrupted delivery of childcare, which means I don't know how, but that, some development proposal would have to make sure that, a tenant such as Wonder Spring would be able to operate continuously, so that there wouldn't be sort of a 2-year delay where childcare disappears and then reappears in the community. Development doesn't always mean purely commercial development. There are opportunities for nonprofit and community use. Our community has lost a lot of semi-public space that used to support a lot of community activities. The Methodist Church supported the Narberth Theater. The Baptist Church supported various meetings, Boy Scout meetings, and our borough facilities, our current facilities are used, well, pre-COVID, were used very, very extensively. So we want to think about, is there an opportunity to reclaim some of that lost space in that? Is it a given that the frontage will have a bit, and no, it is not true. There is no development plan. So I can't say where a building might be, where a building might not be, how much open space, how little, except that council has passed a resolution not to decrease the amount of public space and that it would like to increase the amount of public space. There was a question about the 2006 open space plan, and then whether there was funding available from that. And those funds did not materialize. The plans were completed by many municipalities in Montgomery County, but the dollars did not happen. Mr. Metrick, maybe you could speak to, or Ms. Beckett, the selection of who was invited to the near neighbor meeting.
Yeah, we were targeting a group of about 35 to 50 so that we could make sure that the Zoom format worked for us. And so when we did the geography of that, we selected all the properties on Elm Terrace, the properties facing property on the 200 block of Sabine, as well as Essex. And at that point, we had about 38 to 40 invitees. So it was just a geographic selection that we did. So if you were on Wayne Avenue, you just didn't get that invitation to that particular event.
Okay. How come I am not considered a neighbor when I live nearby? I think that question was also answered by Mr. Metrick's explanation. Is the redevelopment of the site part of a master plan or vision? Well, the open space plan says that we should have more open space. So there's a connection to a master plan. We have talked about the loss of community services, but other than that, this plan has not come into focus enough in terms of its specifics and what it is going to do for us to make those connections. But I'm hoping that by hearing some community goals from you, we'll be able to start connecting those dots. Has consideration been given to developing it into sort of an additional business district? No, that has not been discussed before. Has the business association signed off? No, not yet. Would it necessitate converting to two-way traffic? Again, not knowing what the plan is, there's no way to know. I would imagine there are some plans where it could become two-way, and there are other plans where it could remain one-way. And as a plan comes into focus, the community will have to come together to help make that decision with whether the use justifies the change. This question here, based on 35 years as a journalist covering projects in 8 states, thinking it doesn't occur in a vacuum. We might have a budget crisis or other fiscal issue, and that's why we are looking to do this. Well, we do have a fiscal issue, and that is we see over time the revenue stream, which is 5% of the borough budget, starting to disappear. And that risk increases as time goes by due to the building reaching the end of its useful life without major renovation. And major renovation also reduces the income we can receive from the building. So the vision thing is this meeting, is talking to all of you and understanding what your goals are, and then we will go back and try and put those pieces together and try and come up with something cohesive so that a future meeting could actually have some real plans that match the community spirit and desires of Narberth. I do not know how many stories it might be or where on the property it would be built because we don't have a plan. I agree that we do not have enough open space, and I think I've addressed that. The desire here is to have at least as much or more open space. Yes, we are aware of the positive impacts of a park. We have had some brief discussions about the environmental impacts about tearing down 201 Sabine. I would point out one of the issues with maintaining 201 Sabine, it's interesting you asked that question, is that it was built at a time when asbestos was used in building tiles, in flooring tiles. It was built at a time when lead paint was used. And one of the sort of trends that council has seen as it's made small repairs, medium repairs, and large repairs is that those costs go way over budget due to the style of building construction, but also the necessary environmental remediation as these things are discovered. So when you have a $400,000 roof project, how it becomes a $600,000 roof project is because of the extensive lead paint. We are not planning to develop a park into a building. We have not done a real estate appraisal or market analysis of the value of the property. At some point, I believe that will happen. But the idea first is to come up with a community goal. And I think maybe that's a sign where maybe I could ask for some goodwill from members of the community who are skeptical. If we were most interested in just getting money, we would do a real estate appraisal because that would tell us how much we could potentially get. But what we are doing first is trying to understand, what does the community need? What is it missing? And what could it have? And then we can figure out whether we can fit all of that into the box that is the size available to us. What criteria will RES rely on regarding potential cost of upgrading 201 Sabine? I'm not doing a replacement, but just sort of repair in place. And the answer is the KCBA report. That the borough contracted that report. We paid for that report so that it would tell us what we need to do to this building. And I know there's been a lot of individuals in the community who don't maybe feel comfortable with the numbers that KCBA delivered. And I welcome that feedback. If you have specific expertise in that area, I think that council is very interested in hearing that. But that is the method by which we can know to make a decision, is to commission a report and receive the report and then use the data in the report, unless it is sort of for some reason grossly defective, which I do not believe the KCBA report is. The analysis from RES is not going to consider the condition and level of use of the park, because the analysis from RES is the idea is to create an RFP based on the goals. So the condition of the park or the level of use of the park doesn't play into it. What does play in is our commitment to maintaining the amount of open space, and that would need to be part of any proposal. The condition of the park, if there was a development, I would imagine it would offer opportunities to improve the condition of any park on that site, because we will be doing some new things. So I think I've already answered the environmental impact question. Impact on surrounding residences. The borough has numerous methods that, if there were to be a development, that impacts to neighboring residences can be addressed, and issues such as dust and noise, parking can be mitigated. You're seeing that now at 114 Forest Avenue, and I think you'll see it at other sites around the borough. And actually, I commend the borough staff for doing a lot of coordinating of a lot of different pieces to make sure that the surrounding businesses and towns, especially at businesses and homes are at 114, are as disrupted as little as possible during that time. Given that the meeting between RES and the existing tenants was confidential, how will we convey to the public the tenants' opinions? I do not think we plan to convey the tenants' opinions publicly. I do think that we intend to weigh those opinions in light of the community goals we are hearing from you, citizens, members of the community, and when appropriate, integrate the tenants' concerns into the community concerns. But the tenants do not come first here. The community comes first. There are many more of us, and it's important that we don't allow the tail to wag the dog. What criteria were used by RES in selecting the neighbors? I think we answered that question. Are there meetings? There is a summary of the near neighbor meeting, and I don't know that that's been made public just yet, but once we conclude this meeting and start to collate all the information together, that will definitely be a part of it. I don't think the RES analysis is only focused on the building component. It's focused on the entire lot. And I'll just throw out, a hypothetical idea here, which is, does it make sense to have the park up against Montgomery Avenue in sort of the least Narberthy part of that parcel? Or would it make more sense maybe for a building to front onto Montgomery Avenue and the park to front on Essex? And in doing so, have a more open space, have a space that is more at ground level, and something that could be more accessible or useful to the community. That's a consideration. It's not the plan, but it's part of thinking outside the box. How does council and its consultant plan to account for the effect of the plans on existing tenants? So council has managed all of its leases to have a right of recapture in a way, to deal with the tenants' need to have security in their rental agreement, while also recognizing that if we do want to enact some form of development here, if that's our choice, then we will be able to coordinate all of those tenants, if necessary, to vacate the site at some point in time. And again, it would be possible maybe to build on one site, part of the site, and then following the completion of that build and the transfer of certain key tenants who were part of a community goal-based program into that new building, then the older part of the building could be taken apart, et cetera, et cetera. These are all ideas. They're not things that we have committed to or do. I don't think that there will be any kind of report on the effect on property values. That's not something usually that a government does. I think we try to look to community goals and build a beautiful thing or meet a goal to make a better place for people to live. That probably will have positive implications for property values, but it's not something that we calculate or commission a study on. Sorry, the text is moving around a little. Will input from local real estate brokers be solicited? If a local real estate broker has an opinion, I would love to hear it. I think people in the real estate community have fantastic ways of looking at this in ways I can't, because I'm not in the real estate business. So please send in your comments and thoughts. And the RFP, once it goes out, a broker is absolutely within their rights to know a developer and take it to a developer and become part of that process. Has the borough provided RES with details of any negotiations, lease term extensions, rent increases, and improvements? Yes, I think RES has access to all of the current tenant information that is also available to all of you in the public. Who are the short list of recipients for the solicitation of the RFP? Beth, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Beckett from Real Estate Strategies. I believe what you're referring to is in our initial proposal, we outlined that there are a couple different ways that communities request input, request proposals. And one of them involves doing a broader request for qualifications and then asking a short list to respond to a specific RFP. I don't think that that is what Narberth is thinking about doing. You're thinking about, as I understand it, a broader distribution than a request for proposal to try to get as many ideas from the community as possible. Aaron, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Beth. Will the report address the parking at Sabine other than as support for the building tenants? I would say yes, because the RFP is going to have a vision for what could be at the total site. And I think it would address the building, it would address the parking, and it would also address the park. Will considerations on the effect of viewscape and sunlight be made? I'm going to say absolutely yes, because in this borough, when we do property development, we go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, whether it's commercial or whether it's something like this, which might be a private-public partnership. But those are studies that we have done in the past on numerous occasions, and we know how to do them, and we can and will if it gets there. The RFP will be available for the public. So when the RFP comes back from RES, it will come to council, and that will be public. That's sort of the draft. Then council will discuss it and make changes it wants to make, and that will be done in a public forum. And then the final version of that will also be public because it will be distributed out into the community. And the way it can be viewed is it will be part of the meeting packet for the evening in which it's going to be discussed. And I imagine we'll go an extra mile and make a special part of the website to house that information, probably also containing some of the information and questions that we're answering tonight. RES, Beth, maybe you can answer the next one about assessed value, because I don't know that we can answer it, but maybe you know a way.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I quite understand the question behind the question. Again, we're going to be focused on trying to translate the goals that we're hearing from the community into requirements and specifications in the request for proposal. So in theory, I guess if one of the goals was to increase the assessed value of the property as much as possible, that could be a goal, but it's typically not something that we address.
Okay. Will RES look at day-to-day management of the property and looking into the Yentis statements? No, that's not part of the proposal or part of what RES was contracted to do. Those statements are available. They're also public documents, and if you would like to look at them, you can go to the borough website, or if you can't find something, contact the borough office and we can provide it to you. We will not be doing an analysis of current local market conditions. This is more of a community goals driven process than a process that is looking to sort of maximize rentable commercial space. Some of these tenants, even if they are nonprofits, may be commercial renters in the sense that they have a lease and they pay rent. But I don't think we're doing that kind of analysis. I think I answered the next one. Yes, on the next one, they will be posted in a timely manner prior to the meeting. That's how we do things. Will there be a public meeting? So depending on where community opinion goes, we may have another president's forum at some point in this process. A president's forum is an opportunity to have, in this case, unfortunately, very structured because we're on Zoom, but a less formal, less structured opportunity for question and answer. Whereas a council meeting, there's a public comment, but there's not necessarily public council community back and forth. So, it's sort of reading the room, seeing where the proposal comes together, and then getting a sense of how people feel about it. I am committed to having as many meetings as necessary to build a real community consensus so that everyone feels good. I can't make everybody happy, but generally the community feels good about what it's doing. It doesn't feel like council flew down from the planet Mars and what is wrong with these people. That is not what our goal is. That's not how we want to work. Can members of the public contact Elizabeth Beckett? They can indeed, and she has her email. And I have asked if you could also CC me, Amy Uderick at narberthpa.gov, because sort of keeping all the information in one place is very helpful, and making sure that everybody's sort of been heard, and just as you're seeing here with all these questions. I have a chat in the way of reading this next one because I guess we're at the bottom. Can the property owned by the borough be subdivided? Absolutely, it could be subdivided in many different ways, and pieces could be sold off to generate sort of just straight income. But it's possible, but I don't think that that's the current will of council. I think there's a belief that a ground lease agreement on the parcel as a whole, or maybe in sections, would allow the borough to just retain that ability to own this land and control this land for, in perpetuity, because we don't have any more land. That's the sense I'm hearing. All right. So where are we next? Going back to the slides. Okay. That was just a pretty slide that everyone was going to look at while we answered these questions, but we can move on. Beth, I hand it over to you to talk a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much.
And your firm.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming out tonight. What a great attendance, and it's been really terrific to hear from so many of you prior to the meeting. I am here tonight with my colleague Kelsey Edelin, who is manning the chat, so please be nice. We are from Real Estate Strategies. Our firm is based in Paoli. We've been in business about 25 years, and I'll tell you what we are not. We are not real estate developers, and we are not commercial real estate brokers. What we do is provide advisory services that are grounded in an understanding of real estate market and financial conditions. We also do some economic development consulting. But a good part of our work is involved with helping both private and public sector clients really understand how they can use land or buildings to help meet their goals. And that's whether it's an organization's goals or community's goals. We could go to the next slide. So I think Aaron has talked a little bit about that fact that that's really what we've been retained to do. Two things. One is to really listen to your goals and how and what your priorities are, so that they are reflected appropriately in a request for proposal. Because whether it's an organization, a not-for-profit that's responding to a proposal, or a developer, they want a clear idea of what a community wants. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste of time for them. They want to know that what they're proposing sort of jives with the goals of the folks who are receiving that proposal. When we're working with communities that want to leverage their real estate assets, those goals kind of typically fall into three buckets. One is we want to use our buildings and our land to provide services and amenities directly to our residents. A second is we want to use that real estate asset to encourage something in our community, whether it's some kind of community serving use, whether it's a type of development like senior housing or something like that. But there's a focus on, we have a priority and we want to use our real estate asset to make that happen. And the third bucket of goals typically has to do with generating revenue. And as you'll see by what we're trying to suggest in our little diagram, is those goals aren't always mutually exclusive. And so what we're trying to do is listen to the multiple goals that I'm sure the community has, and to express those in an RFP document. There is a whole range of ways that communities leverage their real estate assets, from just using land for either passive or active recreation, using their ability to lease facilities to get services, for instance, from a not-for-profit, doing a partnership either with a private entity or a not-for-profit to maybe use that property to combine uses and hopefully spin off some financial benefit to both parties. As we move more into the generating revenue priority, communities lease their facilities to try to maximize cash flow, or they may sell property to an end user, either to maximize cash flow or to encourage that user or that use in their community. So there's a whole range of ways that communities use their real estate, and we hope that the RFP that we put together reflects how you'd like to use yours. I'm going to turn it back to you, Aaron, for more Q&A.
Now we're going to go to the questions that you've all been asking, and I'm not going to type the answers. I am going to try to answer them out loud. Is there a rent roll history on all the tenants who have rented property over the past 10 to 15 years? I am not sure how long we retain those records and that data, but I'm sure that up until a certain point in the past, I don't know how many years, it does exist, and yes, it could be shared. And why was the? Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, and you can. We just uploaded today. I believe it's 4 or 5 years worth of the 4-quarter financial reports to the website, so you can at least get those and look at them and see what tenants paid on the revenue side of the ledger for the year. Mm-hmm. And those are all public record. We're just happy to provide whatever we can get our hands on, but that's the real challenge for the older material.
Why was maintenance on 201 deferred? It was deferred. Well, number one, when the Siegel Corporation took its 30-year lease, they knew that they were walking away from that property at the end of 30 years. So they had an intrinsic motivation to defer maintenance as necessary, especially as the lease came towards its end. Once the borough acquired the property, we did do significant updates because of that deferred maintenance. I would say it was more sort of repairs and necessary things, fire code, minimal, absolutely necessary ADA upgrades, etc. Repairs where water's just pouring in through the roof, etc. But we were also motivated to defer repairs that we might make because we knew that the school district retained a right of recapture, and that the borough could pour in our tax dollars, and then that building could be taken from us, and we would be compensated for our improvements, but at more of a pennies on the dollar kind of rate. And so that is the reason that the property endured, 40 plus years of deferred maintenance. Why is this the best use of our taxes when we are in a pandemic and need a bathroom in Narberth Park? I think we're having this conversation because this 201 Sabine property contributes 5% to the borough budget. It is a net income generator, and we are concerned that we will lose that income, and then our ability to make improvements and offer more services in other parts of the borough will be more constrained. Would it be possible to put in a membership-based community pool? I'm going to just say yes. That seems like it's something that could be possible. I don't know that the site and its size and et cetera would work for that, but there is no reason that it could not be considered. The estimate that the 20-year cost of improvements was $275,000 a year versus yearly income of $250. Where are those numbers inflation adjusted? So that you're saying that in year one it's $275, $250, but that rents in 20 years might increase to a point where you are, you're still only paying $275 on your debt, and you would be making significantly more with your rents. I think that I'm going to go off with a personal opinion here. So I'm going to put personal opinion warning, which is yes, it is possible that the 250 income could increase so that it doesn't become money losing, but it's going to take you a long time, sort of the end of the year 18, 19, and 20, where you would get back to making the income you were making in year zero. And so on the whole, you're still looking at something that, even if it isn't a pure net loss, it doesn't match 5% delivered to the borough budget every single year. That is the current scenario that we are used to. Why was the public not polled before this process began? This is backwards. Ask the public for thoughts and ideas before hiring a firm. So the idea of hiring a firm is to engage with the community to get thoughts and ideas. So that's what we're doing. And once we have those ideas, then we can put them into a document that we can all see and share. Will the community be invited to propose ideas for the best use? Yes. And I would be interested in them. So feel free to type them in the chat if you have ideas. Would the park be retained for public use? yes, I mean, the idea of open space and a park and our commitment to maintaining a park, by definition, a public park is public, and not not sort of reserved for a commercial tenant or a specific use. And I think, for example, Wonder Spring has a small enclosed playground area that is part of their rentable space, that is only used by their their children. That is separate from Sabine Avenue Park. Over what period is the 4.2 to 4.7 million projected to be spent all at once? It can be spent all at once. It could be spent over a period of years. I think if you read the KCBA study, it can't be spent over 20 years. There are things that have to happen and be repaired, and it's going to take a sort of an initial effort to catch up on that 40 years of deferred maintenance. What would it cost to demo the building and make it all a green space? That is an idea that has been floated. Just make the whole thing a park. And it could be a park that is a field for activity. It could be partially woodland area. It could be gardens. It could be, sort of more of a nature preserve. Those are all options on the table, and they all have a financial cost, which is the loss of revenue and the increase in taxes to compensate. But there may be community gain, which is this place would be great and beautiful, and I would love to spend time there, and I would be happy to have it in our community. So those are the conversations that we are going to be having on Borough Council based on the various suggestions and proposals that you've given us. Is there a list of borough services which were considered to be cut instead of closing this daycare school? I don't, again, the building brings in revenue, but I guess you're asking if we just continued to maintain the building and the building began to not make money and then eventually began to lose money, whether we could cut other borough services to maintain it. That would be a major departure from council's position, which is a commercial rental property should be rented at market rates and have a financial return. Why was the RFP issued ahead of a poll from the community? The RFP has created the poll from the community and created the forums in these 3 meetings for us to hear from you. Why has the project not been reviewed by the Planning Commission? Because there is no plan yet, as of yet. We are soliciting goals and ideas from you as a building or structures or configuration of the space might take shape. It absolutely will go to the Planning Commission, and those members will bring their specific expertise to bear. Are the council members willing to find the best solution for all community members? I mean, I do think that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to hear from you and hear a real, a symphony of ideas, and then try to put them together into themes and buckets and figure out what might be possible. Please provide a timeline. I don't know that I can provide it because I don't know that there is a plan yet. And until there's a plan, I can't offer you a specific timeline. The timeline I mentioned earlier about getting through the RFP process is a process of the next few months. And then once we receive, results from that RFP, I imagine there will be significant more community discussion. And then assuming that we found something that we liked and hit all of the bullet points for community goals and financial goals, and then we would begin a land development process, which also is protracted. So I can't give you an answer per se, but I can't imagine, even under the most aggressive timeline, where some magical proposal comes back that we are all gung-ho about, that we are breaking ground on anything in less than 18 months. I just, that would be a pie in the sky dream, and I put the odds of it at like 1%. I am not aware of any deed restrictions. Resolutions do not have the backing of law. That's more of a comment. Yes, we will share the RFP with the public. I've answered these. Moving along. Oh, I'm getting some repetition here. Is the borough budget as presently allocated available for all to see? Yes, the borough budget is always available on the borough website. Very shortly, you'll be able to see the draft budget for next year. Currently, you can see this budget and many years back. And, one of the things I commend Mr. Metric for is 3 or 4 years ago, really reworked all of the chart of accounts and the borough budget to make it much more clear to look at and understand. It's really quite detailed. In a Lower Merion Township where it's much larger, there's a lot more roll up. It's harder for you as a citizen to know really exactly where your dollars are being spent. But in this case, you do have the opportunity to take a look at that. Go to the website, search for budget, and you'll find it. Why weren't the meetings with tenants and neighbors recorded? It was just a decision that we made with the tenants. It was a confidential meeting because they're commercial tenants and they have business needs and they are sharing information maybe that they don't want to be made completely public. But with the neighbors, I don't know that there was a good reason for it. If we had the property as open space without income, how much was our taxes? I think we decided it would be about an 8% increase in property taxes. So it's 5% of the borough revenue, but you would need an 8% property tax increase to offset it. Those two numbers don't match. What's the reason? Well, not all of the borough's income comes from property taxes. So you would need more property taxes proportionally to match that 5% of the borough budget. 5% of the property taxes are probably only 3% of the borough budget, 3.5%. If a recreational space is retained, what if any ordinances or zoning can be put in place so that the adjacent changes to the parcel is favorable and supportive of recreation? In other words, a halfway house might not feel comfortable for families at play. This happened at a previous residence where this person lived. Yes, I think, we would look at zoning, et cetera, and try to see, what might be going on. I do think, we go over our zoning with a fine-tooth comb and, we try to split the hair in terms of permitted uses in different zones very, very narrowly. And that we have a great planning commission to help us with that. If we had the property as open space without income, how much would our taxes be raised? If it is a small amount, it may be worth it to have open space. That's more of a comment. Doesn't this planning process adversely impact current negotiations with existing tenants? In some ways, yes. And in other ways, no, they are aware of this process. We've been including them, openness, transparency. We've been negotiating leases with them with these known recapture clauses. I know that there's a lot of uncertainty with the tenant. I'll give it to you, Sean. But otherwise, we're frozen in time. Because we are forced as a government to operate in public, unlike a commercial landlord. We have to have it both ways. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. This issue of the landowner needing a right to recapture the property from the tenant has always hung over lease negotiations at this property for a long time. So yes, Andy Rubin's always told me this is a difficult thing to deal with in lease negotiations, especially when he brings someone in new to see a new property, and a lot of times they walk away because of that reason. So yes, that's the idea that the property needs these rights of recapture embedded in their leases. It does make it harder to lease.
How long will this process take? What is the earliest date when I can know that Wonder Spring is no longer available for childcare? I'm going to answer this question by saying the number one feedback that we have received so far as a council is that uninterrupted childcare as an amenity within the borough is important. That's the number one message that we've received. The number two message that we've received has been about the preservation of open space. And so hearing those two goals and knowing that this is a goals-based process where we're going to try to develop something that meets those goals, I would reassure you maybe by saying, keep involved, keep listening, but as this process goes on, expect that those goals remain near the top. Shouldn't the survey be sent out to all Narberth residents and not just near neighbors? Beth, maybe you could address that.
Yes. I think when we kind of developed the public participation plan, the goal was to have an in-person workshop with as many neighbors as possible. Obviously, we're not doing that. So we wanted to provide another avenue for those neighbors to participate. And I believe that Michelle Carroll did yeoman's work trying to get email addresses, because we were going to do an email survey delivery from those near neighbors. I think one issue is that we don't have email addresses. Is that correct for all residents?
Correct.
So that was a challenge. And I think the flip side of this is sort of the open ability of folks to comment both tonight, ahead of this meeting, and after this meeting.
Okay. Looking for questions that have not already been answered. Just give me a moment. Did you consider that? Yeah,
Aaron,
go ahead.
You may want to note that we're going to do some polling later in this meeting. So there will be an opportunity for everybody
to have some more feedback. Yeah. Yes. Did the board, did you consider the rec board report on the property? And I think, yes, we have considered it. And there were a number of options, one of which was a pure green space option. And so, yes. What is the maximum density allowed on the property by right? That's a complex question. I'm going to defer that to be answered in the FAQ, because it will quote the zoning code and have some charts associated with it. Could we do a garden and membership-based community pool? It's definitely something that could be done. Seeing some comments here. I'm moving through to questions. Most of the public want more meetings. Will you have more meetings? Yes, we will have lots and lots of meetings, and we will communicate through the borough channels when those meetings are, and when they will be talking about 201 Sabine versus maybe, some months we discuss other topics. How can we have faith in the current leadership to accomplish complicated major projects given the failures of the roundabout, the terrace, and the Windsor bioswale? Much time and money were devoted to all of these and were never brought to completion. I'll answer that question by saying that though the roundabout, I supported that project, and I thought that it was a great opportunity to make a more walkable community at a Narberth Gateway. We were overruled by Lower Merion Township, and we got a traffic light instead. Okay, moving on. The terrace and the Windsor bioswale were both projects that developed under the prior professional administration, and sort of had a momentum. And I think you saw when they came to the council with a composition very similar to this one and the current administration, that when they were considered, they were not moved forward. And yes, money and time was devoted to them. There's always going to be money and time that is spent on plans and ideas that do not come to fruition. Part of the planning that goes into that is determining that it doesn't actually make sense. The idea might be grand, it might be wonderful, but when we get down to the nitty gritty or the dollars, we make the right decision, which is not to proceed. This is not zoned that a major corporation could come in. It could not be, the borough owns this land. So it can't be a strip mall, it can't be a bank, it can't just sort of become apartment buildings unless it is something that the community wills, and I don't think the community wills to have any of those things happen. What are your thoughts on a dog park? It's one of the ideas. I've heard pros and cons. Can the property be subdivided and sold off? I think I did address that. I mean, it could be, but I think there's a strong desire to retain the land. How many stories and what type of property could be built? I mean, ultimately the borough controls its zoning. So the borough could change its zoning for its own property. But I don't believe 5 stories would be permitted on North Essex. And I will get you the specific answer, Steve, in the written fact. But as I mentioned, the 5 to 7 story apartment building is misinformation and is not part of this plan. What is the cost of the RES assessment? Sean?
I think our contract with RES is in the neighborhood of 10 to 12,000, I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Community goals will be formulated before RFPs go out. That is correct. The other elected officials in Narberth are in this meeting. So they are all listening. They're reading the chats. They're copying and pasting and working on their buckets and their ideas and looking for opportunities and looking for ways to coalesce all of this information into a common community goal. The parking lot is not considered open space because it is a parking lot. How do we afford the redevelopment project? That's where the public-private partnership comes in, where someone is going to develop the site to a use that might have the opportunity to have more rentable space. It might not appear to be a bigger building. It might not take up more of the site, but given that that school is very spread out on a sloped property, there is an opportunity to create more usable space, and in doing so, create more potential income so that some of it can be shared with the borough and the rest of it could be shared with the person who has financed the development. That is that's the private part of the public-private partnership. Why now? I think I answered that with the slide. Getting there. A huge concern is that a new building would mean no park for years of construction. That is absolutely a concern. And, we'll have to see whether we can, through the RFP process, find a way to maintain continuous open space in the same way it would be desirable to maintain continuous childcare. Will council consider the impact of losing mature trees on the site and the wildlife habitat that exists? I'm sure that we will. And we will weigh the impact if for some reason certain services are not available during the time of construction.
May I jump back to one, Aaron, if you don't mind?
Please do. I'll just
sent
keep
in by
reading
anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
If the property was renovated in some way, how would Wonder Spring still open and operate? Childcare center cannot temporarily, I guess they left out the word close, without a lot of planning. That's something we learned loud and clear from our tenant interview with Wonder Spring. So that's why we did that. And that's definitely going to affect whatever decision is made in the future.
Are there emergency construction or issues that must be addressed in the building this year? Sean, I'll let you take that one.
Pardon, are there any emergency repairs being done in the building this year? That's the question. No, not other than things that get reported as maintenance issues. We have a hierarchy of maintenance needs: electric, gas, mechanical come first, plumbing next, and then sort of things that wear out over time typically get negotiated in lease renewals. Those are things like carpet and paint. But right now there is no major capital improvements scheduled for the project. We had a couple on deck, but council deferred those out till after this process finished. I'm speaking specifically about repaving the parking lot and doing some interior concrete work on the campus.
Will the property go into a land conservation easement? That's something that's on the table, but I don't have any answer as of yet. I think we would need to understand how much and what part and for what reason as part of a plan as it develops, and then the community could make that decision. When are the tenants' leases up? They have a staggering end dates, but as I mentioned, there are recapture agreements so that if we did choose to move forward, we could send a notification, and then within a certain amount of time, we could proceed. Is there an opportunity for grants to fundraise or pay for open space? It's always a possibility. We did some initial investigations at a very high level. Nothing really came up that would be available for our community, but new things are always available. And as we work through the process, we'll continue to keep our ear to the railroad tracks. How will council review the proposals it receives? Will it score or rank them? I do not know yet. I think we're looking to see how many ideas we get back, and then we will kind of use sort of understanding the world of ideas there, what might be a good process. But I do think some kind of score or ranking or weighting system would allow us as a community to sort of agree to the method and then understand how we're making the decision. But until we get something back, I don't know that I can answer that question. Let's see here. Could a major redevelopment overburden the current infrastructure? It is possible. I mean, I don't know the exact capacities of the various infrastructure components at that site, but if it did, then part of the engineering of a building is to address those off-site issues, and that would be built into the costs borne by that private developer as part of this public-private partnership, and it would be taken into consideration so that everything fits. Why is Borough Council only committing to protecting the current amount of green space? Well, I think the Borough Council is soliciting options and learning about what the community wants. And while we committed to the existing amount of green space, that by no reason means that we are not interested in having more green space. I think we'd like it, but it's the question of if more green space, then what are we losing? And what are we not having? And so we are having this conversation, and it'll add more to that debate. If the roof and elevator are attended to, why start again? There are only two parts to a very large, complex building that, regardless of the completion of the roof and elevator, still require many millions of dollars in renovation to be brought up to standards. Would it be possible to build higher on a smaller portion of the land? I think I addressed that. The school site, as it is laid out, is very spread out with a lot of sort of internal open space and other things. And I do think that there's an opportunity to possibly even use less of the site with hard surfaces from an overhead perspective, but actually offer more services inside that building envelope. Is there a mechanism to have a vote from all residents on the best use of the property? Community meetings like this are the opportunity for community members to speak to it. There is no referendum mechanism, I think, in boroughs in Pennsylvania, if that's what you're asking. Narberth owns several properties. Are those being considered and evaluated also, or only 201 Sabine? Perhaps those properties could generate income. So, Mr. Metrick, could you speak to the properties in Narberth Borough that the borough owns, just so we can have a listing?
Properties the borough owns. Well, of course, the municipal building, 100 Conway Avenue, the building at 80 Windsor, Narberth Park, and there's a couple other structures on Narberth Park that are borough owned. The borough also owns the property Station Circle in the downtown. Borough also owns all the streets, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure, and streets and signs. But that's not what I think. I think you're talking about real estate, correct? Real estate and durable assets.
Real estate. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
That's it. I didn't miss anything, did I?
I don't think so. No.
We just bought 6 slivers of ground near the Narberth Avenue Bridge, so we own that now too.
Oh, little slivers.
Little slivers to build the bridge.
Is there any data on the number of parking spaces that are used on average at peak times in the existing parking lot?
Yeah, that comes out of the parking study. I believe that the peak usage there was around 78 or 80 midday. Weekday midday was the peak because that was when the property is being used. So from that, the peak usage is less than 70% of the lot's capacity.
So definitely some opportunity for better uses versus just sort of asphalt. Why not tear it down and make an elementary school as it previously was? Wouldn't LM Township have to chip in? The reason that Lower Merion did not exercise its right of recapture, even though it is experiencing tremendous growth in enrollment, is that the site itself is not large enough to build an elementary school according to current modern standards of what an elementary school must have. And that is why the school district backed away from recapture. I think there was a period of time where Narberth would have loved to have its own elementary school again and its own cohort of students learning together, but that it was not in the cards. Maybe consider a kid forum so they can give out direct ideas. You could do that. Okay. How will you ensure all constituencies are heard, including elderly homeowners? Increases in taxes can be detrimental. I'm not saying a lot of questions about senior needs. And so I'll take the opportunity here to say that some of the goals we've heard, not in this forum, but through other communication, are that it would be nice for the borough to have a space for a senior center. It would be nice for the borough to have affordable residential space for seniors looking to downsize. And some of those senior needs and kind of connecting all of those dots, childcare, senior need, food bank, into all these community uses, theater space or open space for meetings and events. Those are some of the things that we have discussed previously. I'm not hearing a lot of it here. Haven't heard the word preservation. Isn't the present configuration ideal? It may be, and we may come to that conclusion, but I think there are a lot of things that we might come up with that we as a community might like better. So first we have to come up with them, and then we'll be able to decide. Has there been thoughts to move the borough building offices and library up to 201 Sabine? Actually, Sean, maybe you could mention that was part of the KCBA plan.
Yeah, that was a real brief thing that they looked into for us, and the cost of building new was so much higher than what the borough would spend on renovating and updating 100 Conway Avenue that it was kind of considered a non-starter when we looked at it. We never got beyond a very concept plan idea of what it costs per square foot to build new.
This meeting is your chance to submit ideas. There's going to be a poll coming, and then we will be discussing them in a public meeting. And I point out during those public meetings, when we're having those discussions, there is more opportunity for public comment. Have solar and alternative sustainable uses of energy be considered for the mechanicals? I think if we got to the point where we actually knew what we were doing, there seems to be a very strong belief amongst council members that reducing the borough's carbon footprint is important, and I think it would play a large role in any potential development that might happen. Mr. Metrick, could you tell us when the Wonder Spring lease expires?
Yeah, the lease extension was approved by council last week, negotiated with Wonder Spring. So the extension runs for 24 months past the expiration of the current lease, which expires June 2021. So the new lease goes to June 2023. It does, however, have the 18-month right of recapture clause in it that all leases at the building have.
Mhm. Is there any risk that Narberth could be booted out of Lower Merion School District due to continued overcrowding? No, that is not legally possible. What about refitting the building instead of tear down? Has that been considered? I think those are the low $4 million number figures that we're talking about. And I would point out those $4 million numbers aren't a renovation of the building. They are addressing the critical infrastructure needs of the building. So you spend that money, you see some of it, but you don't. But a lot of it is invisible and behind the scenes because it's about the mechanicals of the building. Something about the theater space. Okay, well, I have not had a chance to read the whole chat. I will, obviously. And I'm glad that some of the things not in the Q&A are in the chat, and we will be collating all of this and putting it together. And I also agree that senior voices may be limited due to the complexities of this format. And we need to be extra mindful that it's not as inclusive as a regular public meeting. Proposals for redevelopment would seem to foreclose adaptive reuse of the extant structure and or simple renovations or maintenance. Is the environmental impact of tear down and building anew in the consideration of council? Is environmental impact not a cost? It is a cost, and I think it's still open. It's still open for consideration. We're asking right now, is there something else that could be better? Could space be made available to rent garden plots for personal use? Absolutely. That's something that we could choose to do with our green space. What is the net cost of the library and maintenance of that property annually? Sean?
Well, there's some questions within that question. The borough, the budget for the library is about 5% of the borough's operating budget, and a large share of that just goes to operating costs for the library, and a large share of that goes to the salaries of the library's employees. If the question is about what's the cost to maintain and operate the library as a building, and I'd have to look into that. It of course would be less, and we haven't properly capitalized the expenses for the repairs that we know are coming down the road for that building as well, but they aren't as extensive, and the building's in a lot better shape than 201 Sabine.
So I'm going to end the Q&A.
It's a nuanced answer.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to end the Q&A here. We're losing participants, and we still have polls, and I'd really like to get to that poll. If there are other questions, type them in, keep them coming. We will be reviewing the entirety of the chat and the entirety of the Q&A at the end of the meeting as we start to put all of these ideas together. So, Beth, or Kelsey, actually. Kelsey, this is your time to shine.
Everyone, thank you so much for all of the input in Q&A and boxes. Both, they were, as Aaron mentioned, both and will be reviewed multiple times by all of us here on the call and other members of council. So everything there is being heard and listened to. One thing we also wanted to do here in this meeting is start to do some polling based on some questions that Sean will activate in a moment. There's two questions for you. The first one asks you to select 3 different options out of the list you think are the most important considerations for what 1 Sabine looks like in the future and sort of the goals for this property. You can select up to 3, and there is an option if none of these resonate or there's additional consideration you want to be included. There's an other option at the end. You can select that one and describe your other in the chat box. So again, that we can get all of that heard. The second question asks you to then just select one. It's the same list of options. You just had to choose one as the most important. One would you select? Another option there, and you can put a response in the chat box. I'm taking a look at the chat. Hopefully that was clear and everyone was able to hear me. And you can answer once per account, I would say. So I think once per household, probably how is logged in today. But you can also, reiterate your in chat if you have other household members who have different responses. Sean?
Kelsey, would you mind if I just maybe reiterated some of the things you said? Because I think you were blinking a little bit on your connection.
Okay.
I'm guessing mine is a little bit better because I didn't get that. I didn't see that response coming back from the chat. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
No problem. There are two questions posed in this poll for everyone, for all the attendees to see. And the choices that you have to answer are the same in both questions. And so I'm just going to read through those answers once. And in the first question, we want you to pick what you think are the three most important priorities. And in the second question, we want you to pick your one favorite. So hopefully when we close the poll, we'll have 3 times as many votes cast in the first question as we do in the second. The first two possibilities here are really getting at the issue of income. They're asking the question about, is it important for the property? The first question, the first possibility would be, is it important for the property to generate enough revenue to actually drive your taxes down, actually drive the need to raise taxes, or the likelihood that taxes would be raised down? In other words, maximizing the revenue output from the property. Or are you saying, I don't need my taxes to go down, but it would be nice if they could stay at least the same. So get enough revenue out of the property borough to balance the books, so to speak. The next two possibilities both have to do with the idea of preservation. And they're blending in the revenue ideas. The number 3 is preserving what's there today, not specifically those in particular uses, but maybe uses like them in the building, like a daycare, like a light office use, like a recreational use. So as long as it was revenue neutral, meaning it didn't increase or decrease the revenue the borough would get from the property. Or maybe you're saying it's worth preserving those uses, but I don't, so far that I don't what happens to the borough's revenue. It's most important to preserve what's there. That would be your choice. If you felt that way, number 4 would be a good choice for you. The next 2 questions are about open space, using some or all the property for outdoor public space. I'm sure that's going to be popular, and I get the benefit of looking at votes that have already been cast, so it looks like that blue bar is really growing. Or the second public space there has to do with indoor public space. So we're trying to differentiate between whether outdoor is more important than indoor, or maybe you want to vote for both kinds of public spaces just to make sure that public safe space has a heavy weight when we close the poll. The next possibility, which I guess is the 7th one, using some or all the property to provide options for housing, such as senior or affordable housing. Those are special housing types where you'd either be age or income qualified to be able to take advantage of. The next one is preserving the existing daycare and community nonprofit uses, regardless of how the property might get reconfigured. If you think that daycare and community nonprofit uses are paramount in the future of 201 Sabine Avenue, that would be an option that you would want to indicate. And lastly, it's not last, it's second to last, ensuring that any development advances the borough's environmental goals, such as carbon neutrality, stormwater management, and managing the landscape features there. How green do you want to see how green should the future of 201 Save Mine be? Not just to look at green and open space, but how is it managing stormwater, and how are greenhouse gas emissions being managed by the way the property is being used? If you don't see something on this list, click on Other, and please enter that item into the chat. Indicate that it's one of your 3 most important, or maybe your most important. Use the chat as your text opportunity to tell us what that is. And does that sound correct to you, Beth? Having gone through those poll opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. And particularly at the end, the other, use the chat as opposed to the question and answer, and we'll record that.
So there's a lot to think about with this poll. There's a lot of words to go through. We're going to leave it active for a little while here for the numbers to accumulate. So far, we've had about maybe half of voter turnout so far. We can do better than that, right?
Getting responses in the chat that people dialing on an iPad are not able to do the poll. If you would like to submit your responses into the chat or into the Q&A box, we can receive your answers that way. Or you can also email to amy.roderick@marlborough.gov. It's at the bottom of the slide.
Kelsey, you're still breaking up a little bit, so I'll just repeat what you said. If you are on a device where you're not able to respond to the poll, please feel free to either put it in the chat or send an email after the fact to Aaron or me or Sean, and we will aggregate your input.
And apologies if I'm still breaking up, but some people can't actually see the poll. Sean, could you possibly share your screen with a list of polling questions so that everyone can see the screen?
I'll just share specifically the polling window then, if I can do that. You know what? I can share my whole screen.
It looks like the poll is not able to screen share.
You're right, the poll dialog box won't share separately from the screen.
Sean, do you have the document list of the questions?
Yeah, I do. That's a good idea.
You could the document.
Yep. Let me just think that through for a second. Okay.
There we go.
So for those of you who are having technical difficulties, these are the 10 options to the 2 questions. And the question number 1 is which of these 10 options are your 3 most important? And then of those 3 that are the most important, which one is your absolute most important? Or your number 1?
Can I make a suggestion, Sean? Can you change the bullets to numbers? And then people can just in the chat say number 1, number 2, and number 7 or something like that. That might make it easier for folks. And then make the text a little bigger, or put that on full screen. Maybe just make that full screen.
You're gonna test my skills, aren't you?
There you go. That's a little easier.
No, I'm not sure how to make a Google Sheet full screen.
I'm assuming that we can, because of this technical difficulty, we can post this with some of the materials from tonight, and people can weigh in by email or
Yes.
phone call, carrier pigeon.
Yes. Yeah, I think I'll wait for Aaron to come back, but I'll share one of my initial thoughts about this event so far. Is I've been working in the borough now for almost 6 years, and I've never had 200 plus people show up to a meeting. And in the last 48 hours, I've received 35 to 40 emails just myself. So I think, to something that Aaron had said throughout the meeting, we need to take this in and collate the information and make sense of it. I think I think we have a really big task ahead of us, because there's a real high volume of information. A lot of it was really good. So we're going to need a little bit of time to put this together and organize it in a way that makes sense, and strategize about next steps.
Yes. So I think, seeing some challenges with the poll here, we'll take this info. There may be some overwhelming feedback, but we also may consider SurveyMonkey and somehow making it available on the borough website and making it more available. We saw some comments that there's a desire to have this kind of polling out there in the community at large. So we're going to take that under consideration, and we'll see what we can do for you. So with the polling completed,
Aaron,
yes.
I just ended the polling because it notified me that 100% had voted. Now I don't know if that's actually what happened, but
that's a great participation rate.
That was, yeah, right. if only that were true of all voting.
So I believe here we can just see the results, but they are not complete, right? Because certain people voted outside of this process. So I think that rather than sort of going over the results, we will collate it all together. We'll talk about it, and we'll post it on the sort of the after meeting packet. And I think slide-wise, that puts us kind of towards the end of this evening. I believe the next slide is the favorite words that everybody likes to see. Sean's going to click it.
Yeah, I'll get there in a second.
And wait for it, everybody. And one more. Good night. This for the 116 of you who made it to the end. I congratulate you, and I encourage all of you to run for borough council, because this is the kind of stuff that we are usually in the weeds on all the time. It's very unusual that we come to you in the community to get into this level of weeds, but I really appreciate it because it will lead to a better result for this town, for our children and our children's children, and that is why we are doing all of this work. So thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night, and thank you, Aaron.